Sometimes it's the small things, those small details that really tell you the most about a situation. Like, did you hear about this? The UN, they're giving out identity bracelets to children in Gaza.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, over 30,000 of them. And get this, for kids under 4 years old.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is, and it makes you think, why? Why is that even necessary?
Yeah, it is a striking image when you think about it. And it really does, I think, speak volumes about just how fragile things are in Gaza right now. After this recent ceasefire and the prisoner exchange, I mean, it's the aftermath of a 15-month conflict.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
families are returning to homes or what's left of them. I mean, trying to rebuild their lives after all that chaos.
It's hard to even wrap your mind around what these families are going through. And we've got some sources here that really go deep into the humanitarian situation over there. Um, what's the picture looking like on the ground?
Well, it's grim, to be honest. The UN and other aid groups are working nonstop, but the scale of the displacement, I mean, it's just massive. It's over 545,000 people had to leave their homes in southern Gaza, and they're seeking refuge up north.
Mhm.
The temporary shelters are just overwhelmed. Resources are stretched so thin, and the trauma that people have gone through, I mean, you can just feel it.
It's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And that's where those identity bracelets, that's where they come in, right?
Yeah.
Trying to prevent kids from getting separated from their families and all of that chaos.
Exactly. I mean, there's already been, reports of over 250 young children separated from their caregivers. I mean, can you imagine the fear, the anguish, both for the child and the parents?
Oh God.
These bracelets, it's a small thing, but it could be a lifesaver in this kind of situation. Yeah.
It really could be. And
Yeah.
and it just breaks your heart to think about it. And then on top of everything else, there's this whole monumental task of rebuilding. I mean, not just homes and infrastructure, but lives.
Yeah.
What about education for these kids? How are they even beginning to address that?
Well, the UN Relief and Works Agency, they've started a really ambitious e-learning program, and it's got over 280,000 students registered.
Wow.
It speaks to the resilience, that people have, their determination to try to create some kind of normalcy for their kids. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, 280,000. That's really impressive. But I can only imagine the challenges of trying to provide education in a place that has been so just ravaged by conflict.
Oh, absolutely. So many schools, they've been damaged or destroyed. There's a lack of even the most basic supplies. And even the teachers themselves, I mean, they're dealing with their own trauma from all of this. And then there's this, the fear that it could all happen again. The violence could just erupt again. It's a tough environment to learn in.
No kidding. It really sounds like, even though there's a ceasefire, things in Gaza are they're still so precarious. And unfortunately, it's not the only place that's facing turmoil right now. Our sources, they also talk about rising tensions in the West Bank.
Yeah, that's right. The situation there, it's deteriorating really quickly. The Israeli army, they've been carrying out operations in Jenin and Tulkarm, and it's led to more destruction of homes and more Palestinian families being displaced. The UN, they've expressed some pretty serious concerns about the use of force there.
Really?
Yeah, they're saying that, some of the tactics being used, they go way beyond what's acceptable for law enforcement.
So what's the reaction been to the UN's statement?
It's been mixed, to say the least. I mean, there are some people who argue that, the Israeli army is doing what it has to do to maintain security, but then you have others who are, condemning the operations as just being disproportionate and harmful to civilians.
Yeah, I can see how it would be controversial.
Yeah, it's a very charged issue. There's no easy answers here.
For sure. And have lives been lost in these operations?
Unfortunately, yes. The Palestinian death toll, it's reached 39 since January 21st.
Oh, wow.
And it just underscores how volatile the situation is and the human cost of this conflict is. It's just devastating.
It's a lot to take in. I mean, on one hand, you have these incredible efforts to rebuild, to provide aid in Gaza, and then on the other hand, there's there's this escalation of tension and violence in the West Bank, it feels like there's hope and despair all tangled up together.
I think you've put it perfectly. That's the complexity we're facing here. And as we go deeper into these sources, I think it's really important to keep that bigger picture in mind,
Yeah.
how all these events are connected.
So how do we even begin to make sense of all of this? What does it mean for the future of both Gaza and the West Bank?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, when you connect all of these events to the bigger picture, it really does paint a very precarious situation. I mean, the ceasefire in Gaza, it's fragile at best. Any escalation in tensions could easily just shatter it. And the West Bank, I mean, it feels like a tinderbox. It has the potential to ignite a much wider conflict.
It sounds incredibly bleak. I mean, is there any reason for optimism at all? Is there any hope for lasting peace in the region?
It's easy to feel overwhelmed when you see the scale of the challenges, and I get that. But I do think there are reasons for cautious optimism. Maybe small reasons, but they're there. The resilience of the human spirit, that's one of them. I mean, we see it every day in Gaza. Families, they're returning to these homes that have been shattered, and they're determined to rebuild. Teachers are finding these creative ways to educate children in the middle of all this rubble. And that spirit, that's powerful. And that itself is a force for peace.
I agree. Those stories of resilience, they're truly inspiring. But it feels like we're talking about two separate realities here. There's the struggle for survival and rebuilding in Gaza, and then there's the escalating violence and the political turmoil in the West Bank. How do those two realities connect?
Well, they're inextricably linked. The conflict, it's not confined to just geographic borders. The issues of land and security and identity and political representation, those are the things that are fueling this conflict. And they're felt in both Gaza and the West Bank, and they impact the lives of both Israelis and Palestinians.
So what does that actually mean for the people who are living in these areas? What does their future hold?
It's a future that's filled with uncertainty. And that's the unfortunate truth. I mean, the ceasefire in Gaza, it could collapse at any moment. And if it does, it could plunge the entire region back into violence and the West Bank. That situation, it could easily spiral out of control, and that could lead to more displacement, more suffering, more loss of life. It's a stark reality, and it's one that we can't ignore.
It feels so overwhelming, almost paralyzing.
Yeah.
What can we as individuals do in the face of something that's so complex and seems so intractable?
Well, awareness is key. We can't afford to turn away from what's happening. Stay informed, educate yourself about the history, the nuances of this conflict. Engage in conversations with other people, even if they have different viewpoints.
Yeah.
Challenge the narratives that are just perpetuating this division and this hatred.
It's easy to feel helpless. Like our individual actions, they won't really make a difference. But you're saying that awareness is at least a starting point.
Absolutely. And from there, we can actually take concrete steps to support the pursuit of peace. You can support organizations that are working on the ground to provide humanitarian aid, to promote dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians, to advocate for human rights. You can use your voice to call for a just and lasting solution to this conflict.
Yeah, those are tangible things that people can do.
Yep.
It's actually empowering to know that we're not powerless, even when we're faced with something so massive and so complex.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that even small actions can have a ripple effect. I mean, by speaking up, by choosing to engage, by supporting those who are working for peace, you're contributing to a collective effort. And that effort over time can create real and lasting change.
So it's about shifting the narrative, moving away from despair and moving towards the possibility of a different future.
Precisely. And it's about holding on to hope, even when it feels so fragile, because hope is what fuels the tireless work of so many individuals and organizations who they refuse to give up on that dream of peace.
That's a powerful message.
Yeah.
But before we go any further, I think it's a good idea to take a step back and just revisit some of the key figures that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
It's a way to kind of ground ourselves in the reality of the situation and really grasp the scale of what we're talking about here.
You're right. It's easy to get lost in the complexities. So let's recap. Over 545,000 people were displaced in Gaza during this recent conflict. I mean, think about the logistics of that, the sheer number of people who had to flee their homes. And then there are the over 30,000 children under the age of 4 who are wearing those identity bracelets. And that's a stark reminder of the fear of separation and loss that just permeates daily life there.
And those figures, they only tell part of the story. I mean, they don't capture the individual experiences of trauma and loss and uncertainty that so many people are facing.
Exactly. And then you add on top of that the escalating tensions in the West Bank with the recent Israeli army operations that have resulted in 39 Palestinian deaths since January 21st. I mean, each one of those deaths represents a a life that's been cut short, a family of this ongoing conflict.
It's true. These numbers they're more than just statistics. They represent real people, real lives that are caught in the crossfire. It's easy to get desensitized to the numbers, but we have to remember what they really represent.
Absolutely. We can't afford to become numb to the suffering, to the loss. And that brings us back to a crucial question. Given everything we've talked about, the efforts to rebuild and the trauma that's still so present in Gaza, and then the rising tensions in the West Bank, and just the sheer complexity of all of it, I mean, is there even a path towards a lasting peace? Or are we just watching another chapter unfold in what feels like an endless cycle of violence?
It's the question that just lingers in the air after everything we've discussed,
Yeah.
isn't it? I mean, is peace even possible?
Well, it's a question that people have been asking in this region for generations, and there are no simple answers. As we've seen, the conflict is so deeply woven into the history, the politics, the very identities of the people involved. It makes finding any kind of solution just incredibly complex. But I think recognizing that complexity, acknowledging just how deep these challenges run, that might be the first step towards finding some way forward.
But where do we go from there? How do you even begin to untangle something that's so deeply entrenched, so full of pain and mistrust?
We need a fundamental shift in perspective, I think, a move away from this zero-sum mentality that has been fueling the conflict for so long. This idea that one side's gain is automatically the other side's loss. It requires a willingness to really see the humanity of the other side, to understand their pain, their grievances, and to really, truly look for solutions that address the needs of both Israelis and Palestinians.
That sounds incredibly challenging, almost impossible, given the current climate. I mean, how do you even start to bridge a divide when there's so much animosity, so much historical baggage? Where do you even begin?
It starts with dialogue, however difficult, however painful that might be. Open and honest communication, even about the things that are the most sensitive. It's crucial for building any kind of understanding, any empathy. It's about truly listening to each other's stories, acknowledging the wrongs of the past, and then trying to work towards a shared future, one that's built on mutual respect and dignity.
So it's not just about, political leaders coming together and signing treaties. It's about something deeper, something more fundamental changing in hearts and minds.
Exactly. And that kind of change, it can't just happen at the top, at the level of political leadership. It has to spread throughout society. We need to encourage and support these cross-cultural exchanges, educational programs, initiatives that bring ordinary Israelis and Palestinians together face to face so that they can build relationships, dismantle those harmful stereotypes that are just fueling the conflict.
It's almost like planting seeds of understanding and empathy
Yeah.
at the ground level.
Right.
Those grassroots efforts, they feel so crucial. But is it enough? I mean, can you really change a system that's been so resistant to peace for so long?
It's a vital first step, but it needs to be accompanied by actions, concrete actions that demonstrate a real commitment to peace. Things like halting the expansion of settlements and addressing the issue of Palestinian refugees, the ones who have been displaced for generations, and ensuring that there are truly equal rights and opportunities for all citizens, regardless of their background.
Those are really significant changes, and they require. I mean, it requires real political will and a genuine desire for peace from both sides. I mean, is that something that you can realistically see happening?
Well, it demands a level of leadership and courage that honestly we haven't consistently seen, and it needs sustained international support and pressure to hold all parties accountable to their commitments and to make sure that basic human rights are protected for everyone.
It feels like such a fragile hope. This delicate balance between pushing for change and acknowledging just how deeply rooted the challenges are.
Yeah.
It's hard to know what to feel.
You've put it perfectly. There's no guarantee of success. But the alternative, I mean, allowing this cycle of violence and suffering to just go on, that's simply unacceptable. We can't allow ourselves to just become resigned to that kind of fate.
It's a heavy realization, but it feels like the more we understand about the complexities here, the more equipped we are to advocate for real, meaningful change.
Precisely. And while the road ahead is uncertain, the pursuit of peace it's a moral imperative. We can never give up on that possibility of a future where Israelis and Palestinians can live side by side in peace and security with mutual respect. It's a vision worth fighting for.
We've certainly covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, haven't we? It's been a really stark reminder of just how much this conflict costs, in human terms. But it's also left me with this glimmer of hope, this feeling that a different future is possible, however difficult the path to get there might be. What about you?
That glimmer of hope, that's what fuels everything. It's what drives us to keep pushing for dialogue, for understanding, for compromise, even when it feels like the odds are completely stacked against us. Because ultimately it's that human spirit, that ability to be resilient, to be compassionate, to be forgiving. That's what will light the way towards a more just and a more peaceful world.
It's a powerful message to carry with us as we continue to learn about and engage with this issue. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one takeaway you hope our listeners will walk away with today?
Remember that awareness is the first step towards action. Stay informed about what's happening in this region. Engage in thoughtful conversations. Challenge your own assumptions. And use your voice to advocate for peace and for justice. Every voice, every action, no matter how small it might seem, it contributes to building a better future for everyone involved.
And that, listeners, brings our deep dive to a close for today. We've explored the aftermath of conflict in Gaza, the rising tensions in the West Bank, and the deep complexities that make this such a challenging conflict to resolve. We've confronted some really heartbreaking statistics. We've grappled with some tough questions, but we've also witnessed incredible resilience. We've heard stories of hope, and we've learned about the tireless efforts of those who are working towards a more peaceful future. So stay informed, stay engaged, and never lose sight of the human stories at the heart of this conflict.